My name is Max Richter. I'm pastor here, and I want to take a moment at the beginning of the service to thank each and every one of you for being here today, and those who are gathering with us in spirit as we gather together as a community to honor Darby Nelson. Would you pause with me in a word of prayer as we begin our time together? Friends, we have gathered here this morning to praise God and to witness to our faith as we celebrate the life of Darby Nelson. We come together in grief, acknowledging our human loss. May God grant us grace that in pain we may find comfort, in sorrow hope, and in death resurrection. Amen. It's been a pleasure to introduce Sandy Hitch, who will be sharing our first set of memories today.
Christensen, who often says that you don't know the depth of someone or the impact of them until you come to their funeral. I'd like to share some things you may not know. Darby had a distinguished career at Anoka Ramsey. You may have read that he received the very first Golden Chalk Award, which came from students. But he also received the first Distinguished Faculty Award and was asked to give the first last lecture to describe what he would want to say to students as if it were his last. He used the metaphor of paddling down a river to give advice on how to live and brought his rucksack full of things to illustrate the lessons he had learned. Darby organized a program on the very first Earth Day and spearheaded a multidisciplinary course called Environment and Man that students remember. Another thing you might not know, he taught a silent lesson by driving his old 5-speed Schwinn bicycle to work 5 miles each way, except in really bad weather. He even canoed across the Mississippi, downstream to the campus, and back upstream once a year. You might not know that he laid his body down in front of a bulldozer that was going to clear the land now designated as the college's natural area before Pheasant Ridge Road was built off Mississippi Boulevard. He saved that area and then wrote a detailed management plan. It's still being used for teaching ecology at the college. Many of his students became cherished and lifelong friends. One former student said Darby has always been a resource of knowledge from way back to the outing club and the ski club. He said that he feels lucky to have been a part of Darby's accomplished life. Another student, Tom Anderson, later became part of a writer's group with Darby. He felt lucky to land Darby as a biology professor his first semester. Jerry remembers that Darby shared a remarkable lab report that Tom had written. I'd like to quote Tom, and I hope he doesn't mind, from a note that he wrote to the family. Quote, his love of teaching the natural world and life was contagious. Darby lived large, husband, father, teacher, legislator, writer, and steward of the biological integrity of the natural world. It doesn't get any better, unquote. There's also a family connection for Darby and his daughter Robin that doesn't happen very often. Darby got to give the graduation address at the college where Robin graduated in 1997. Colleagues also felt the deep impact of Darby's leadership and his commitment to them and to students. In 1971 and again 1997, he received the Faculty Excellence Award. And in 2019, he was honored with the rare Distinguished Faculty Emeritus Award, a recognition by his colleagues for professional, college, and community contributions. When the remodeling work is completed on campus, his name will join 9 others in the display of Faculty Emeritus recipients. A young staff member at Anoka Ramsey wrote that he remembers Darby as a sounding board, a mentor, and a friend, a model of what he wanted to emulate in his service to students. In reference to working with his department, a fellow teacher commented that he had a capacity to restate and encourage positions that reflected the entire department. That's an art, by the way. And he had such an enthusiasm for learning. His close colleague from the very first day they both started at the college, Max Malmquist, had a bond with Darby and a few others with similar interests that grew over many years. They called themselves the Clan. that's with a capital C. They shared outdoor adventures like camping, canoeing, snowmobiling, hunting, cross-country skiing, picking blueberries, playing golf, and enjoying family celebrations. There are many stories of perilous adventures, all before cell phones. He also talked of the annual Nobel conferences that they attended annually at Gustavus for many years. Darby and Jerry have made generous charitable gifts to support the College Foundation for student crisis grants, for workforce development scholarships, and most recently for biology equipment, such as Z-Space technology. Yes, I had to Google it. It's a special laptop for educating students of all ages, which uses a combination of augmented reality and virtual reality. It's especially useful for teaching anatomy and physiology. When asked in the fall of 2020 to participate in the Making a Difference virtual event to request support from the community for student crisis grants, Darby and Jerry came to campus, actually twice that fall, because we had to tape portions of it a second time. Darby seemed happy to be back on campus. During the first taping, Darby shared the core of his commitment to education. He said, "This is a great place for a lot of people. It took a long time to figure out what this really was all about, and it really, really mattered. It's been so just outstandingly fun." Can't you hear him say that? Where you can help kids get it together, and you're going to have to do something about making it better for other folks, unquote. The director of the foundation, Lindsay Schiller, took some music students to the Nelson home in December to sing Carol with Bells for them as a special thank you. Darby enjoyed it so much that they also sang Shenandoah and Down by the River to Play. What a memorable thank you for an amazing couple. Someone with a lifelong passion for the environment, a natural teacher and mentor, a genuine, sincere, and gentle man. Darby will be remembered as one who loved life and teaching, and they loved it back. Thank
I would like to share the beginning of my 40-year friendship with Darby Nelson. It was just about this time of the year in 1982. I was in my 8th year in the Minnesota State Senate. There was an election. And just like we've seen in the last my first 8 years in the Senate, I represented constituents that included my home in the city of Coon Rapids and went east across Anoka County.
We want to hear you.
Oh, do I have to start over? Somebody said no. All right, back to the redistricting here. And my district started with the city of Coon Rapids and went east from there across the Anoka, where I had been elected out of that district 3 times. The maps came out, and the new district excluded everything east of Coon Rapids and much of northern Coon Rapids. 60% of my electorate from the previous 3 elections were gone. Added to the new district was the city of Anoka and the northern tier of Hennepin County on into a slice of Wright County. Adding to my concern, I soon learned that the incumbent state representative from Anoka, with a familiar name and several years of holding elective office in the area, was soon to announce his intention to run for the Senate. Perhaps to cheer me up, a friend and environmental activist, the late Erica Sitz, told me that Darby Nelson was planning to run for the House in the new district. She was effusive about how much I would like working with Darby. She was spot on. Throughout my public career, I had involved myself in environmental and conservation matters. It was a passion driven by a love for the outdoors and a stewardship ethic, but it was avocational. I was a CPA with a degree in business administration. Darby Nelson had a stronger passion in stewardship ethic and a wider experiential base. He was also, of course, very well educated in environmental matters with several degrees in science and a PhD in zoology, with his PhD research focused on aquatic ecology. Dr. Nelson was just about halfway through his 35-year career that Sandy talked about at Anoka Ramsey Community College, teaching biology and environmental science when he was first elected to the legislature. He was well suited to work on environmental matters of public policy, and it was a treat for me to work in partnership with him. I learned a great deal from him, but first we had to get elected. I think if there's another picture, who's ever in charge of that? There it is. In the top left, those young folks in the corner, including myself, ostensibly endorsing Darby Nelson to run, which I did. And the other individual in the center of the picture that many of you I'm sure will recognize is the late Leo Foley, who was the Senate District Chair in 1982, and ultimately, 14 years later, Leo succeeded me as the state senator for that district. Darby also had a strong opponent. He was facing the incumbent mayor of Anoka, and Anoka was a good share of that new Senate district, or new House district. But Darby and I and our team, and I should say Darby and Jerry, who of course were a team in that endeavor as they were throughout life, outworked them, and we had victory. And the results you see down below, you see a very young Robin and Pear in those photos that were delighted to have their picture taken with the governor signing Darby's legislation. And in that photo, that I expect most of you wouldn't notice, Darby giving the speech on the House floor. Over Darby's left shoulder, to our right as you're looking at, in the background is Representative Willard Munger, it's very appropriate that there's Willard overlooking Darby's shoulder. I had gotten to know Willard during my term in the legislature, and I'm going to say a little bit more about Willard's involvement in a moment. So for 6 years of legislative partnership, Darby's 3 terms, we had the opportunity to work together on many environmental issues, including recycling and hazardous waste management, air quality, vehicle emission reductions, cross-country ski trails, water management, and many, many others. And as they say, to read about many of those things, you have to buy the book. I was very disappointed and saddened when, during his 3rd term, Darby informed me that he was not going to run for election in 1988. I was disappointed, but I understood, because Darby, as Darby could do so well, explained his reason that he missed the classroom. He wanted to spend more time in the classroom. And he thought he could make a greater contribution by being in that classroom and with the writings that he intended to do. And of course, we saw the results of that. Darby won many awards for his work during his legislative experience, including, and I made reference to Willard earlier, every year the DFL party singles out one individual for the Willard Munger Award for distinguished environmental stewardship. And I'm proud to say that Darby and I, on separate years, each won that award. And after Darby left the legislature, our partnership continued right up to recent times. We were involved together in organizations like the Freshwater Society, Conservation Minnesota, as well as spending some leisure time together outdoors, birding outings with Lyle Bradley and others. It was a great partnership, and I missed Darby a lot. And Darby was helped throughout that adventure by his partnership with Jerry. Thank you.
I'm Paul Austin. I'm the Executive Director of Conservation Minnesota. And I've been thinking a lot about all Darby has done for the environmental community and listening to colleagues who talk about their work with him. And the word that keeps coming to my mind is generational. It's not close to exaggeration to say that Darby's work will be felt for generations to come. And because that's how he thought. He thought generationally. He was always thinking about the future and how great we could make it together. The first thing that pops up is the leadership role that Darby played in advocating for the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness Act in 1978, protecting one of the most beautiful places on earth for all of us, for our children, and for our grandchildren. I even learned that one colleague has saved to this day Darby's testimony that he delivered to Congress in moving that act forward. And if any of you have ever been to a legislative hearing, it's usually the recycling bin that's filled with legislative testimony at the end. But that's a testament to the inspiration of Darby's words and the power of his voice. I remember Darby and Jerry spending days walking door to door in 2008 to educate voters about the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment. They worked their shoe leather off. And after it was approved, the largest state conservation funding measure in U.S. history, Darby's leadership and consensus-building skills made him the clear choice for state leaders to help implement as a member of the LaSarre-Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council, to make sure its 25-year effort started on the right path. Darby was there. It was generational. Darby and Jerry helped start major watershed protection programs at both Freshwater Society and at the Nature Conservancy. But they also made sure the programs included internships and fellowships to ignite the passion and jumpstart the careers of a new generation of environmental stewards. Personally, I'll always remember my first summer at Conservation Minnesota. Darby would load me and an old overhead projector into his Saturn sedan, and we traveled around the state speaking to Lions clubs and Rotary clubs and student groups, whoever would listen. And Darby was just so much fun to watch. When you combined his passion for nature, teaching, and people at these events, there was a spark that was lit in him, and it was contagious, as said earlier. You could see it in his eyes. And there was always a moment when someone would ask a question that let Darby know that he had found something that really mattered to the people we were talking to. And both the crowd's attention and Darby's animation would just grow and grow after that moment. On those drives, I got to hear about his early adventures with Jerry, which was so much fun. And he told me about the first time he looked below the shimmering surface of the water and saw a lake teeming with life. He said that he was overcome with excitement, and it made him want to learn everything he could. Darby was always wanting to learn and discover through his entire life. And for me, he was a teacher and a mentor, but I think it was his love of discovery that I'll remember most. It was so much fun to report to Darby the results of whatever the latest strategy, experiment, or program was that we were doing at Conservation Minnesota. He would sit at the table and he would kind of lean forward, listening intently to what we had done. He would take notes, sometimes detailed scribbling that was happening over there with his pencil. He would ask questions, and then he would intently kind of seek clarification about what was going on. And some of the most rewarding moments of my career came when, finally, he would pause, put his pencil down, and look up, and a big boyish grin would cross his face. And he would say, "Golly." And so hearing Darby say "golly" or "wow, that's really something," was when you knew you had hit it out of the park. So as we look back at all Darby has done for Minnesota, and all he's done for each of us here today, and all he's done for countless generations to come, I hope there's a moment for each of us when the thought of his life makes us smile from ear to ear like Darby did, because, golly, that was really something.
What is When I first read this book, I was overwhelmed, really, by the beauty in the writing. It's a book about geology and biology and aquatic ecology, and yet Darby was able to write in a way that was concise and lyrical. He was able to interweave his own thoughts and opinions, sometimes humor. And I learned later that there's a genre for this type of book that's called creative nonfiction. But I still like to think of it in the way I first thought of it, which was that this is poetic science. In a chapter that he titled "The Future in a Raindrop," Darby tells a story about lakes in southern Ontario. In the latter half of the 20th century, those lakes had been devastated by acid rain. Virtually nothing living in those lakes was able to survive. Then 30-some years after remedial efforts had begun, Darby and Jerry visited the area to see if anything had changed. They found that the lakes were still acidic, but they also found some signs of life. And Darby was inspired to write this. I think about the loon pair visiting Nellie Lake to check out prospects there. The green frog waiting patiently at its edge for insects to come near. The ever-patient spider, resilient, persistent, optimistic, ever-seeking. Every rock, every crack, an opportunity. But that is life's inherent way, isn't it? Bursting with hope. How can I be otherwise? Several years later, as we can see in this picture of Darby on, or I should say in the Le Sueur River, we can see that Darby was absolutely not otherwise. Darby was resilient, persistent, optimistic, positively bursting with hope. Every rock, every crack in the riverbed, an opportunity. I can hear him saying, "We'll make it through this low stretch. Pretty soon we'll be paddling again, and we'll get to see what's around the next bend." We don't have Darby in person anymore to encourage us to discover what's around the next bend, but we do have our memories. They offer solace, joy, and inspiration. And while we remember Darby as a teacher, a leader, an advocate, let us also remember that Darby was a student. Little Darby would never have become Big Darby without the help of some excellent teachers along the way. And when he decided to retire from teaching to devote more time to writing, Darby figured he had a lot to learn. So he sought out a teacher. And he found someone who he would come to say was the best teacher and mentor he ever had. Elizabeth Jarrett Andrew of the Loft Literary Center. Jerry shared with me what Elizabeth wrote on Darby's passing, and I'd like to share a passage of that with you. Darby was an enthusiastic learner, mostly because he was willing to be humble and because he loved his subject so much. He was willing to do whatever necessary to share that love. I think that was the secret to the success of For Love of Lakes. He stuck with his craft until finally his love could shine through. For love of lakes, for love of a river, the Minnesota, Darby's love shines through brilliantly throughout, and especially in the conclusion to both books. The passages I'm about to read are about lakes and a river, and I believe they apply universally to everything that Darby cared about. Inaction does not become creatures of love, common sense, and reason, descendants of our tribe who would never forgive us. Absent love, lake protection is an impossible mission. Absent understanding, lake protection is a fool's dream. My motivation in writing this book has been to help people learn about and appreciate the river I love. Awareness comes first, which leads to appreciation, which leads to a commitment to act. I invite you to get out and spend some time on the Minnesota River. You might just fall in love.
From the shore where moonlight lays the sand, I set sail, and leave behind the land. Let me rest
to start a bit off topic. The loss of my dad is not the only thing happening here. This is a moment that I've been dreading for near a decade. Not only is he gone, but somehow I need to say something that is equal to the moment and worthy of all you who are listening. I know who would do this right. Dad would have written something perfect. Too bad for all of us, I didn't ask him to write his own words. Well, the good news is this is the short version, and the bad news is it's still quite a bit too long. I recently read something about happiness that would have made my dad feel good. Happiness, it said, is equal to what you have divided by what you want. For a moment, my dad would have felt like the happiest guy around. Not only was happiness a favorite topic, but this has math. It is the math behind his philosophy when it comes to stuff. What you want is the denominator. So the less, that is, the less you want, the happier you are. And he loved to not want more stuff. But on the numerator side, one thing that he had was outdoor activity, especially paddling, exploring, and of course Nordic skiing. For a guy who didn't start skiing until his late 20s, he was very good. He and I had a favorite trail over in Wisconsin that we skied together. It was a trail that drew us in. Weekend after weekend, we found it almost impossible to stop skiing. One more hill, he'd say, and then repeat, usually for a good mile before finally turning back. Beyond the pure enjoyment, his goal, of course, was to have yet another good showing at the Bossa Loba. But in the end, I'm sure nothing made him happier on skis than going out with his grandkids, only just more than one short year ago. Dad was famous for not wanting anything new, fancy, or nice, like the old rucksack. Did he want a new pack? No. He got great joy from the pain it was to carry on a long portage. In fact, the less new, fancy, or nice, the more he liked it. It wasn't just the rucksack, it was clothing too, especially undergarments. They were blended fabrics in the beginning, 50% cotton, 50% polyester, but long before Dad was done with them, they were 100% whatever, the last thing to get washed out and end up in the lint collector. Threadbare and see-through, but they did the job, making Dad happy every time he wore them. Happiness is what you have divided by what you want. Would have made him happy. And then I would have maybe pointed out that wants are not just stuff. We want other things, like keeping Earth on a sustainable path and preserving some quiet natural places. Of course, these were a part of his motivation to keep wearing that old t-shirt. If he could manage, that was less CO2 going into the atmosphere. But we all know that's not enough. And for him, not such a happy thought. Did my dad get unhappy? Yeah, and mostly angry. And when he got angry, he liked to do something about it, like run for state rep. When he won and he got in, he worked as hard as I think he ever worked on anything, and that's saying something. He worked for common sense things that we can do together, only together, as a united society. There are those among us who don't yet buy this idea. Some blame politicians as though none can remain honest. That's when I say, Dad was a politician, and no one I know is more honest. He had a favorite story. While making his rounds in his legislative district, he came upon the door of a woman on government assistance. Despite her disability, she was able to maintain her home and put food on her table. She had heard of proposed cutbacks to the assistance program on which she relied. So she sat him down and showed him her down-to-the-penny budget. Far from the mythological welfare queen, my dad found a woman living on a shoestring who simply needed the most minimum support to remain otherwise independent. A conclusion drawn from an honest look at evidence: government can be a solution. My dad's honesty was without compromise. From earliest memories, this was clear. An early lesson was the story of George Washington, another reluctant politician, who the legend goes admitted cutting down his father's cherry tree. "I cannot tell a lie," he said. I still remember being caught once as a 5-year-old. His calm, firm words are still clear to this day. They made it known that truthfulness and honesty are expected at all times, period. No doubt this strict honesty is related to his love for science. In science, it is essential. Seeking and following evidence, observable facts, is the foundation of our modern world and understanding the perils that face it. With this approach, we have to recognize the interconnectedness between our everyday world and our trajectory. It is the same foundation enabling the technology all around us right now that gives us certainty our climate is changing and we are the reason. Dad knew this. He thought about it every time he drove his small, fuel-efficient car. None of this made him happy, but riding his bike did. Back and forth to work, or out on an errand, no gasoline and no tailpipe needed. The other thing that made him happy was his work. Teaching science was a true, pure pleasure, one that he only gave up when he wanted to write even more than he wanted to teach. But what gave Dad the most happiness? Well, that's definitely family and his clan of friends. Fellow teachers, students, neighbors, acquaintances, scientists and environmental activists, and yes, politicians. From all of these came treasured friends. I do not doubt that if he were here today, he would smile widely, look each of us in our eyes, and say thank you for the friendship that we share. He was truly blessed, especially by his 5 grandchildren, whom he loved dearly. But I can't conclude without saying that one blessing is above all the others, and that is my mom, in whom Dad's love and happiness is personified. Family and friends, I've heard and lived so many wonderful stories with and about you, and look forward to many more. And I just want to also say thank you for remembering my dad today.
before I even started at this church 5 years ago. Scott Ford, who is also a retired member of the Anoka Ramsey faculty, reached out and told me, Max, you're going to love this church. You get to work with Darby Nelson. And it could not be more true. So his reputation preceded him. Within our congregation, Darby served in multiple leadership roles, the Staff Parish Relations Committee several times, as an usher and greeter and counter, and as a favorite guest preacher. Jerry shared one of his sermons with me for Epiphany, the season that follows right after Christmas, and he had done a sermon on diversity, if you can imagine that. Of course he did. And as he opened up the sermon, he commented that, I'm not sure what Pastor Joyce, one of my predecessors, was thinking, asking a former professor and politician who might be getting long-winded to be the guest preacher today. But he said, I promise not to keep you here too long, but if I do, we'll order pizza. Can't you just hear a sense of humor coming in, and then that big wide grin that we've been hearing about, and that we all carry in our hearts? In every aspect of his life, Darby lived what he believed. When I first came to Champlin, Jerry and Darby had hosted one of the meet and greets at their home for me to get a chance to get to know the congregation. And I distinctly remember everybody moving around the circle and talking about what the church meant to them in various and beautiful, touching ways. And once we had made it all around the circle in their kitchen, Darby paused and said, you know, there's one thing we haven't talked about today, and that's the importance of philanthropy. And I thought to myself, I don't know if I've ever been in a church where that was named out loud. And it stuck with me. For stewardship of all of his gifts is who Darby, who Jerry is, and in the legacy of his family. The tending and caring of what is most important in the natural world and all the gifts that one has been given, and living a life generously and with passion, including sharing the financial gifts with organizations that were near and dear to your hearts. Caring for the environment, as has been mentioned, in countless ways that will impact generations to come. And all of the resources poured into his students and his colleagues, and most importantly, his family. A balanced life of work and play and exercise and fun and just the right amount of silliness. In everything, Darby's uncompromising honesty, his humility, his kindness, his sense of humor, and his passionate commitment to education and the environment, and the best of social justice commitments within our United Methodist tradition and far beyond, were all part of Darby's legacy that shall continue. I remember another conversation that Darby and I had when we were talking a couple of years ago about becoming a reconciling congregation in the United Methodist Church. And that is to say, in our tradition, this was to go on record with a vote of the congregation to say that we officially welcome all people from the GLBTQ plus community. And Darby saying to me, Max, we have to do this. I'll do whatever I can to support it. And wouldn't you know, when the time came, our vote was unanimous to make that move. That is part of Darby's and our legacy as well. As we were working on the scripture for today's service, Jerry wrote me and said, have you ever heard the Darby version of the Bible? I had never heard of the Darby version of the Bible. Now we know there's a Darby version of the Bible that we live. That's something that we all know. But it's a true story. There really is a Darby version of the Bible. And so I want to share with you this passage of scripture that Jerry chose from Philippians, the 4th chapter. Because it really is so very true to who Darby is. For the rest, beloved, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are noble, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are amiable, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and any praise, think on these things. And what ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, these things do, and the God of peace shall be with you. And doesn't that sound like Darby? In the Christian year, we have just entered this season of Lent, beginning with this Ash Wednesday. And as I've been thinking about the time and how this all unfolded, as we come to this time of Lent, which in our tradition has to do with honoring our own mortality and reflecting on how each of us are stewarding the gifts that we've been given in our lives and what each of our legacy will be in the world, and the legacy that we'll share as community, what a beautiful time for us to stop now in these moments and all the days to come to think about how it is that each of us are stewarding the gifts of our lives. The gifts that Darby shared with all of us as students, as colleagues, and most importantly as his family, and what each of us are going to do with these gifts to continue to bring that wide smile across Darby's face. Because we truly know what he believed he lived. In his last days, Jerry expressed such gratitude that Darby recognized his family, that he could eat and swallow and kept his family laughing and was silly with them. And he could say, I love you right until the very end. And friends, I believe that love is eternal. Jerry, the two of you have shown us such a beautiful example of what it means to be a true partnership. All of you, Robin and Perry and family, have shown us what it's like for our family to love one each other so deeply as we move through all these days. And that again is a love that lasts eternally. Along with the passage from Philippians, I also think about a passage that really reminds me so much of Darby are those beautiful words from the prophet Micah. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with God. This is the legacy of Darby that lives on in each of us. For all these commitments, for the ways he so generously shared all his gifts, let us give thanks. And may we do justice to Darby's legacy in our lives by continuing to steward these gifts and sharing them to the best of our abilities. Thanks be to God for the gift of Darby Nelson. Amen. Now, Robin, his daughter, is going to share some.
I sent my dad a thank you card. Well, he was in memory care, and this is what it said. Thank you, Dad, for showing me how to be silly, for giving me a wonderful childhood and telling me the best stories, for teaching me how to play do-re-mi on piano at the age of 3, for teaching me how to save money, for teaching me how to use things up until they can no longer be used, for teaching me how important it is to be physically active, for teaching me about the game of football, for financially helping me through college, for teaching me to write a rough draft, set it aside, and go back to it later, for teaching me about synapses and dendrites, for helping me buy a house and being my landlord, for showing me unconditional love. And last but not least, thank you for being the best dad in the entire world. I love you, Dad. And this is the last song I always played when I finished playing piano for my dad.
Miigwech, I'm incredibly honored to be here today and to listen to you and all this love that is in this place right now. I want to introduce myself in my traditional way because it's important to me in these spaces to understand more of who I am and what I'll be speaking to. So Erica Bailey Johnson, Indigenous Jaganashiman, Mamengwe, Indigenous Ojibwe Makwa Indodem, Bamijigamag Indonjaba, Bamijigamag Gabe Gikandaso Wigame Mindano Kigan Wendakamiga Wigamigam, Indibendagos, Nisquagamari Zage Igini. So I am in the Bear Clan. I am from Bemidji, Minnesota, and I am an enrolled member of the Red Lake Nation. And I work at the Sustainability Office of Bemidji State University. I also want to take a little bit of time to acknowledge the day. I am not surprised that it is sleeting and snowing and raining and freezing water on this day. I think that is very appropriate, and we should honor it. And I also want to acknowledge the place. I feel that this place next to the river is very significant. I would like to sing a song. It's called The Water Song with you. I don't think I need to explain why I want to sing the water song. It feels very right to do in this space at this time. And I would encourage you to join me if you feel comfortable. It is good and it is okay to join me in this song. I will sing it 5 times through. This song was written by Doreen Day Wabanakwa at the request of her grandson, Mash Coons. And it is sung like a lullaby, and we don't use shakers or drums. Doreen and her grandson give permission for everyone to share this song, sing it to the water every day. It is clear that Darby sang to the water every day in his own way. A light on Mother Earth has moved on to another place. It is neither good nor bad, right nor wrong. It is the cycle of things. Some lights, though, are a bit stronger and spread their good thoughts, deeds, and love a bit further. So was the way of Darby.
Thank you. Thank all of you for being here today. The stories will continue to be shared. If you would like a copy of Darby's book, if you haven't picked one up, there you'll find those right outside in the community room as well. And may the many ways in which we share Darby's love continue on as we honor his legacy always. Go in peace. Thank you for